everyone, my name is Xenia and today we're talking about managing expectations in wrestling. So in this video we're going to talk about the concept of managing the viewer's expectations in wrestling and specifically in TV wrestling using the Mercedes Varnado AEW debut that didn't happen as an example, and I'm also going to walk you guys through the 3 ways that AEW could have handled the situation differently. And let me preface this by saying that obviously AEW didn't owe us her debut. They never directly announced it, they never even directly teased it, but it was widely expected. And another disclaimer would be, I'm definitely not trying to say that AEW were in the wrong in this, or that AEW deserve any kind of slander for not giving the fans what they wanted. This is definitely not the message of the video. I would also like to stop and go more in depth on the they don't owe us thing, because obviously expectations and the responsibility of expectations lie largely on the shoulders of those who have those expectations. So a lot of the times fans would fantasy book something or would imagine that something would be cool if it happened, and then when the promotion doesn't deliver, suddenly it's the promotion's problem. However, I do feel like it's wrong to completely exclude the promotion from the equation when a certain expectation of the viewer doesn't get met. We live in the informational society, and in the modern world, the promotions, just like any other TV show producer, are well aware of any expectations that their viewer might have. We live in a time and age where even traditional TV show showrunners keep track of social media and keep track of their fans' expectations. Whether they choose to meet them or not is a whole other question, but point number 1 is they are aware. They know. And we've been in this era for a good chunk of the 21st century. It's very visible in super popular shows like, say, Sherlock BBC, where they addressed all the fan theories of how the main character survived the Reichenbach fall, or Supernatural, where they had been trying for the entire longevity of the show, it seems, to at the same time cater and fan service and also not offend and not disturb a mainstream/casual viewer. And in this particular instance with AEW, it's also obvious that they kind of knew what was going on because they were subtly addressing it. We did have the infamous boss line from Britt Baker, which prompted a lot of people to think that Mercedes was going to appear. So one thing I think we should definitely get out of the way and stop ignoring is that wrestling promotions know what the fans are talking about on the internet. And we definitely very recently had that with WWE also, when Cody Rhodes was heavily rumored to come back to WWE, which did eventually end up happening, but it's no exaggeration to say that WWE used the hype and used the rumors to draw viewers to their shows, because we've seen a lot of fans tune into Raw weeks and weeks in a row just because of their expectation to eventually see Cody Rhodes. And I am 100% sure, that's just me, I'm 100% sure that WWE knew what they were doing, stretching out and saving that debut for a special occasion, for WrestleMania, yes of course, but also knowing full well that fans will tune into their weekly shows expecting that debut to happen eventually. And a lot of the times promotions have been more heavy-handedly playing into that, the same way that they did with Bray Wyatt coming back. We've had vignettes, we've had QR codes, we've had hints, and that was of course more direct, and if you knew, you knew. If you noticed those things, you knew almost for sure that he would be back, but it's playing in the same concept of expectation. And there's nothing wrong with that. The way that expectation phenomenon worked more directly in, I wanted to say old school, but not necessarily old school, 2000s, I would say, wrestling was a bit different and a bit more direct. They would do vignettes for whenever a wrestler was supposed to debut or whenever a wrestler was supposed to come back and there was a repackage. They would just do weekly vignettes on every show for weeks and weeks, building that expectation, and that was fun. But currently promotions don't really do that, and instead they do it in more subtle ways, the same way that they did with Bray Wyatt. But also AEW in the past has been excellent with dealing with viewers' expectations, and that's kind of why the Mercedes Varnado story seems off, and that I feel is why some analysts and journalists have been saying that the debut was actually planned and it didn't end up happening for other reasons. When CM Punk was coming to AEW, it was not directly announced, it was not directly teased, but everyone knew it was coming. It was heavily rumored, it was leaked, it was reported, and I fail to believe that AEW, the meticulous company that they are, would just haphazardly let that leak. I, for one, think it was intentional. And the same way with Adam Cole's debut, the same way with Bryan Danielson's debut. No one knew for sure that it was going to happen, but people were buying tickets to shows, people were tuning into shows with the expectation. And I feel like part of the reason is because the relationship between wrestling promotions and TV channels that they have deals with is different now. Now we see TV companies more heavily meddling into the promotions business, I would say. It's rumored that, say, the TV company didn't let AEW do a bigger tribute for the late, unfortunately gone too soon, Jay Briscoe on their show. But also with the debuts, we've heard that the TV company wants the viewer to be sure that the debut would happen so that they tune in. And I also feel like that's part of the reason why it's been kind of taken away from the excitement of WWE's Royal Rumble. We don't get half as many surprises as we used to back in the day, and fans are justifiably, rightfully upset about it. And that's definitely a more direct or the most direct way to deal with it. Just completely skip the complexities of managing the viewers' expectations in any other ways and just directly announce the wrestler. And I feel like TV companies have had a large part to do with that. So again, I feel like in modern wrestling, especially in this past 5-ish years, companies have had to bet more heavily on the viewers' expectations. And like I said, AEW in the past have been subtly but very, very intelligently dealing with those. I'm going to use the situation with Mercedes Varnado or Mercedes Moné. I keep saying Varnado, I'm sorry, Moné is a new name, or Moné, Mercedes Moné, I heard her say. Comment down below if I'm butchering it, because I really wouldn't want to. I want to respect her and the immense talent that she is. I think it's Mercedes Moné. Anyways, I'm gonna use the situation as an example, but I feel like those 3 ways / techniques can be applied to any situations that has to do with an expectation of a wrestling viewer that isn't met. So way number 1, I call it the replacement or substitute, if you will, because replacement is a bit of a negative word. I wouldn't want it to be negative. A substitute. If there is a huge debut that's expected by the viewer, and you as a wrestling company know that it's not going to happen, that you're not going to make it happen for whatever reasons, you don't want to, you can't, it's not what you intended, whatever. Just give the audience another debut. I'm not saying a bigger debut, because that's not always feasible, you know? That's not always something you can make happen, but a different debut that would be somewhat as exciting, or a different return that would also be somewhat as exciting. And we saw AEW employ that perfectly, and that especially works if the company is actually planning to bring in that talent, but later. But even if they're not, it could still work perfectly. But we had a situation when in AEW, the Dark Order were teasing the appearance of their leader, of the Exalted One, and we didn't know who it was. And at the same time, it was very heavily rumored that Matt Hardy is headed to AEW. And at the time, he was very much in the prime of the broken / woken Matt Hardy gimmick, the delete, the cryptic promos. And in the minds of the viewer, it made perfect sense that Matt Hardy goes to AEW and he becomes the leader of Dark Order. I also did hear speculations at the time that it would be Bray Wyatt, which was a little less realistic, but, you know, still very much in the realm of a dark, spooky storyline. So what ended up happening was Matt Hardy did end up in AEW, but I guess he was never intended to be the Exalted One, and he was never intended to be the leader of Dark Order, and instead we got Brody Lee. It would be wrong to say that no one was speculating that that would happen. There were definitely some talks, but it was definitely the less popular pick, the less popular option, and it resulted amazing. I loved it, and of course the late great Brody Lee, again, gone too soon, unfortunately. It would be, amazing to still see him perform now in today's AEW, and it's such a shame that it can't happen, and AEW has been doing amazingly, paying such beautiful tributes to him. But, at the time, it was one of the most exciting things to have ever happened in AEW. They still kept that element of surprise. It was still unexpected. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, this is cool, but we knew this was gonna happen. Matt Hardy still did eventually appear, so people who were expecting him again weren't let down. But Brody Lee was as big or even bigger a signing as Matt Hardy. And that different appearance and that different turn of events really, distracted from it and really made the fans happy. So in the instance with Mercedes, we could just have a different debut. I think people would, pop as hard for Trinity, which obviously Trinity was in Japan with Mercedes, and I don't think that's logistically possible, but that could have happened. Or Cameron. People have been reacting wonderfully to Cameron in AEW. Or it could also be the return of Thunder Rosa. Like, something was supposed to happen, especially with the way that the promos with Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida were conducted with Saraya. It really made it seem like Toni Storm would not end up being the partner in the end. But, nothing happened. So what they could have done is they could have still taken out Toni Storm, they could have still turned Shida on Toni Storm, and they just could have given us a different replacement. They just could have given us another big appearance or another big return. Way number 2, I call a plot twist. And essentially what that means is distracting from the absence of that expected debut with a storyline, with a way that the story is shifting. And in this particular instance, I would say make Hikaru Shida go full heel during the match. Give us the full, dramatic, loud heel turn, distract from the absence of another person with concluding the storyline, with turning it in a different way, in a different light. And I feel like that would have worked fine because they still had the interference of Hikaru Shida that happened, which instead was used to further the story, which is also fine and would have been perfectly fine if there wasn't an expectation of someone else appearing and saving the day. So what I would do if I were an AEW booker, I would just go all out with Hikaru Shida's heel turn. Just make her beat all of them up, blood, whatever, I don't know, make her freaking snap. And that wouldn't necessarily mean actually a heel turn for her, because maybe we could have had the same thing that happened when Becky Lynch back in the day turned heel on Charlotte, which actually made her the biggest babyface in the company and turned Charlotte heel instead. So maybe Hikaru Shida would have snapped and just beat everyone up, but that would turn them heel and not her. But anyways, I would make it a big moment and maybe not even conclude the match, maybe not even have a clear winner, maybe just have Hikaru Shida cause mayhem. And I know a lot of people tend to dislike no finish matches, and I do agree that they shouldn't be happening often because that's just a cop-out. Like, that's just a way to avoid booking your wins and losses intelligently and upkeeping that balance. But I feel like every once in a while they could be a great tool. So I really do feel like one way to handle it was giving Hikaru Shida the spotlight in that match. And number 3, the third way I see out of the situation would be to just keep going. To just keep going with the expectation, keep working with the expectation, and keep feeding this expectation. Obviously, this way would work best if you're actually intending on bringing in that talent eventually. But even if not, like, AEW is famous for its impeccable long-term booking. And the viewer is used to, a certain storyline or a certain expectation skipping a big show. Like, it doesn't necessarily work the classic way in AEW where there's this big build-up, there's a big expectation, and it has to be resolved at the closest big show. Like, it doesn't always happen like that. The viewer is used to it, you know, skipping big shows, stretching out over months. So another thing they could do is just keep it going, just keep the hints going, just keep hinting that Toni Storm is just a temporary partner for Saraya, and we do have rumors of women's blood and guts, so they will eventually have to form a team, so maybe keep teasing that there's this mystery member of the team coming, that someone else is still coming. And of course, you have to tread carefully. It's a bit of a dangerous territory because there's only so long that you can stretch out a storyline that also keeps building, that excitement, and the longer you stretch it out, the more expectation the viewer is going to have, and the more they're going to be let down if you don't in the end deliver something. Again, not necessarily that, something. And what comes to mind is the storyline in WWE with the freaking giant spider in the cage. And I don't know, I feel like it's so dumb of me personally, but when they were stretching out the storyline with the cage, I was so genuinely curious. I was like, I need to know what's in that cage. I really, really wanted to know. And it ended up being just a toy spider. And they stretched it out for weeks. And it makes me think that, you know, they didn't have a clear idea of how they were going to conclude it in the first place. Which, if it comes to managing expectations that you can't deliver quite yet, it's fine to go on with something without having a super clear plan on how you're going to conclude it. But when it's just a cage, when you introduce it in the storyline and you have no idea what's in it, and then you make the viewer, you know, guess and wonder, and then it's just a toy, that was one of the biggest letdowns WWE has ever delivered on screen, I would say. But, you know, if you tread carefully, you can just keep the expectation going, you just keep it building, and again, as we approach the, again, expected, supposed rivalry between homegrown talent and outside talent, as we see alliances form in that regard, it would also be a good time to keep that expectation going and to keep expecting a mystery team member. And in that sense, in that regard, in that particular storyline, it could be any big return of an ex-WWE star, really, if we're talking homegrown versus outsiders, but implied ex-WWE girls. So any other big WWE related appearance, I guess, even Mickie James, even though she's in a lot of people's minds, and mine also, more so related with Impact than WWE, but for more casual viewers, she's still an ex-WWE person. And I feel like Mickie James would be a super exciting appearance in that context, and it's not Mercedes Moné, and the expectation is still somewhat fulfilled, and the viewer is not let down. So to conclude this, what I'm saying is, sometimes viewers form expectations that at times aren't rooted in reality and aren't rooted in what the company is actually planning to deliver, but also at times encouraged by promotions for their PR needs, for their good, and it's also not a bad thing. But even though the promotion doesn't owe the viewer to meet those expectations, when a promotion enters the game and starts playing with those expectations, which is fun for both parties, the promotion should also handle them properly and have proper ways to go about them, even without directly meeting them. And again, I would like to reiterate that AEW have been excellent with it in the past. And that is the exact reason why the situation with Mercedes is confusing. And I just wanted to talk about it with you guys because I feel like it's a very interesting topic and it's something new that we didn't see to this extent in the world of wrestling previously. So it's just fun to dissect. It's just interesting to dissect. And if you found it interesting as well, give this video a like, subscribe, tap the notification bell to never miss an upload. And until next time, goodbye. Oh,